Chapter 29. Beads of radiant energy ascended from the ground and absorbed into the thick aura surrounding Coda. He grunted as the task strained him greatly. Good work, Coda. Now concentrate the magi into your hands. Let your fingers be the foci. Megan encouraged from his side. Sweat ran down his forehead and dripped off his chin, and his eyes became bloodshot as he quaked with stress. The Verdant Academy shook from the immense power being drawn. Dust and stone rumbled and swirled around the two spellcasters. You almost have it. A little more, she said, coaching her student. The magi ebbed in a globular form within Coda's hands. Its form convulsed as the strain became greater than Coda could handle. No, Coda, don't let go. Focus. Focus. I can't. It's too much power. Coda screamed as the magi exploded in his hands, triggering a surge of light to blow across the underground battlefield. Both Megan and Coda were flung backwards in its mighty wake. Recovering slowly, Coda sat up and punched the stone floor. He mashed at the ground, screaming until his hands were bruised and bleeding. Coda, we'll get there. We'll get there, Megan reassured him. What use is all this power if I can't control it? What use is any of this if I can't use it to save the people I love? Coda heard a break in his hand, but he continued to beat the ground into a blood-smeared mess. Coda, stop it. Megan grabbed his hands to restrain him. It's broken. Come, we'll get it taken care of. It doesn't matter. Nothing matters anymore. Coda whispered, defeated. Listen to yourself. Really listen. Do you hear yourself? Coda was silent. His hand and heart throbbed in agony. You want to know what I hear? Coda frowned. I'm not in the mood for your lectures. Too bad, she said firmly. I hear a boy who wants to give up because for the first time in his precious, sheltered life, things have taken a dark and terrible turn. Megan manifested a thick stick and took her gold sash, wrapping her student's hand tightly with the splint. Coda winced, either at the pain or the sharp reproach. My father was killed in front of me, Coda protested. Yes, Coda, he was. Now what? Where do you go from here? Do you pick up the mantle of king and try to salvage the great kingdom that your father fought so hard to forge? Will you scurry off to Nashun to become the so-called arcane guardian while the other tribes fight to take the reins of power from you? Or will you cower even lower and vanish into absolute obscurity and leave your life behind? What you do now, Coda, is all that matters. Coda inspected the dressed hand gingerly, taking in what she had said. I don't know, Coda said flatly. What would you do? Megan spoke without even the slightest trace of hesitation. If it were my decision, I would have already had myself crowned. Will you be there with me when I address the nobles? Coda asked. It's not my place to be in that room. It's your place if I want you there. Coda stood up, favoring his broken hand. And I want you there. Well then, I suppose I'll be there, Your Grace. The king is dead, a cold, stern voice called out. Coda sat in the dimly lit war room. Around him were the 7 lords of the United Tribes. Tull, Megan, and Marcus stood by his side. His father's blood-stained crown rested on the heavy oak table. Carved in the center of the table was an exquisitely detailed image of the elder tree. The leaves were painted meticulously with a vivid emerald green. Arcing above the tree were the sigils of the 7 noble tribes. In the center of the trunk was the sigil of the Dawn Edge tribe. Coda stared wordlessly at the crown, still in a daze. It taunted him. He wished that the night before had never happened. He wished he was alone in his room with Wild Eye, the only one that he cared to be with at this particular moment. Most of all, he wished he was not Coda Dawn Edge. He had always looked up to his Uncle Tull for breaking with tradition and chasing his own ambitions rather than accepting the fate handed down to him by his father. But even Tull seemed every bit as nervous as Coda. Would Tull accept the crown if he left for Nashun? Megan stood to his other side, clearly anxious by the stillness of the air, and feeling quite out of place. Then there was the commander of the White Cloaks, Marcus Newson, attempting to save face after the most monumental failure of his lifetime. Coda sneered. The noblemen were silent, waiting for the prince to say the words they all waited to hear, eyes locked on Coda's sleepless face. Athar Moonfall broke the uncomfortable tension. My prince, I said the king is dead. We are all awaiting your decision. Will you ascend to the throne, or should we begin to discuss another successor? Coda sluggishly turned his head toward Athar. Yes, I know that my father is dead. I was there when he was killed. Where were you again? Athar attempted to maintain his composure in the face of such an insult. He spoke, ignoring Coda's question. We, the seven, feel that perhaps... Coda's heavy eyes narrowed as he replied. You think I should walk away from all this? My father counted on me to carry on his legacy. There was a time when I fought him every step of the way. But that time is far behind us. Tull put a gentle hand on his nephew's shoulder. Coda, it is okay if you wish to take a leave of absence and mourn. You don't need to make such a decision right now. Athar stood to interject. Actually, Advisor Tull, this needs to be decided now. We need a leader now more than ever. The city is in panic. The Black Rabbits not only killed our king, but laid siege to the hopes and dreams of this city. No one will want to live, trade, or study here anymore. We must act decisively. My prince, I will send for double the amount of white cloaks, Marcus started. Are you suggesting, Captain, new son, that we ought to invest even more time, money, and resources into hiring countless more of your cloaks? How convenient. They were so worth the money the first go-round, Coda said with a biting charm. No, I do not believe that even more cloaks will solve the problems facing us here today. Coda locked eyes with Commander Newson, weighed his next words carefully, and spoke. The white cloaks, however, have not outstayed their welcome in Lost Dawns. There is a way that we can increase our military might without paying for the quartering of hundreds more cloaks. Instead, we must raise an army of our own, trained by the white cloaks. We, our people, can stand up against those who would dare to rise against us. He stood up and slid back his chair. The room broke out into a loud murmur of argument between the seven lords, but all were stricken with silence as Coda pounded his good fist on the table. The white cloaks alone cannot defend us. We need a standing army of our own. The nobles began whispering among themselves. The wooden table vibrated as Fendrick Redroot slapped his hand down. What utter foolishness! Who among us can fight? You, Prince Coda? Do not be so rash. Do you have no faith in our people at all, Fendrick? With proper training, anyone can fight. Fendrick looked back at Coda, considering the boy's words. Coda turned toward Megan. High Mage Megan, what are your thoughts? My prince, Althar said before Megan could speak. She is but a mage. She has no say in the... Coda silenced him with his hand and beckoned Megan to speak. Lord Moonfall, I have seen more war with you, and I can see that the White Cloaks have failed at the most important task before them. It's clear to me that Long Whisper needs its own army. Yes, that is exactly what I have been thinking. The people of Lost Dawns love this city, not because we pay them to do so, but because it is their home. They would take up arms to defend their home, our home, from those who would see us perish. Coda spoke with fire in his eyes. Even though we are without warrior tribes, I think he is right. Our people could be trained to battle, Tull agreed. Coda rose from his chair. These may be the darkest of days. Coda stared into the faces of the seven nobles before him. But I will lead us out of them. Chapter 30. Wicker groggily woke up. His surroundings were alien to him, but he recognized that he was in an infirmary. His brother lay in an adjacent bed across from him. Elisa sat sleeping in a chair at Avron's bedside. Wicker slipped out of the sheets and jumped out of bed. It cost him dearly, as his head spurted with a burst of pain and his leg buckled beneath him. He crashed resoundingly to the floor. Wicker gingerly inspected a heavy wool bandage wrapped around his head and grasped his throbbing leg. Reaching for a crutch leaning against the wall, Wicker hobbled to his brother's bedside. Avron, what did they do to you? Wicker quaked with heartache as he looked down at his brother. A deep crimson red seeped through the bandages of his chest. His once ebony features were now deathly pale, his breathing a weak wheezing. Avron slowly motioned his hand up. Wicker shivered as he grabbed it with both hands. Avron, are you going to be okay? I'm going to make those rabbits pay for these. Elisa awoke to find Wicker collapsed in depression and shock. I'm sorry, Wicker. I truly am. It was clear that she had been up all night and day by Avron and Wicker's side. Wicker burst out in a depressing chorus of tears. How can you say that? You're one of them. You have always been one of them. Elisa shook her head, tears forming in her eyes. She just wanted to be there with Avron. I'm not one of them. I never could convince you. Then why did you protect them? As far as I'm concerned, you did this to Avron. If my brother dies, it will be on your hands. Elisa's lips quivered with anguish. Wicker, please. Avron is... What? What is he to you other than someone to lay with? Elisa burst into tears. He's all I have. She turned to Avron, gently caressing his face. All that I want. She sobbed. Wicker. Avron's voice was a shriveled husk of what it once was. Enough. Do not be blinded by your hate. Wicker shivered in rage. Do you not hear yourself, Avron? Avron attempted to tighten his grip, weakly pulling Wicker close to him. Elisa is one of us. You need to grow as a leader. Keep a clear mind. Avron's grip fell loose. His breathing began to slow. Avron, please don't leave me. Not you too. Wicker tightly squeezed Avron's limp hand. He bawled into his brother's chest. Elisa did her best to comfort him. I love you, little... Avron rasped his final words to his younger brother. Chapter 31. Ellicard leaned on Inlay. The patch job done to his wounds were wearing away as the trio made their way through the woods. The cold rain washed away any chance that they could be tracked, but the heavy water pounded upon their weary shoulders, weighing down their clothes. They had traveled all day and all night, but were still another night's travel away from home. I hope Jeddah finds some shelter soon, said Ellicard. His cold breath wisped in the air. He struggled each step of the way, both physically and mentally. His mind was fractured like glass scattered all over the ground. Jeddah's words pierced him like a lance. Jeddah. He still saw her as the child he remembered, innocent, pure, and naive. His life as a black rabbit wasn't easy, but it was simple. He merely took orders and would someday die by the blade. He was growing into this life. However, this all changed the day that Jeddah came back into the picture. His promise to her bubbled to the surface and complicated his once simple life. She spoke a truth that he once would have lived by. It is not the code of a rabbit, but the law of the rest of the world. It does not comply, but it made sense. But she could not possibly understand the sacrifices he had made. She saw him as who he was, not who he is. What did he see himself as? Who he was? Who he is? Or who he could be? Damn her. Master, I'm proud of what you accomplished back there, Inlay said, breaking Ellicard's train of thought. You are a legend now, both famous among our people and infamous among everyone else. Infamy. Famous for the wrong reasons, Ellicard whispered in a daze. There was a silence between the two. Inlay felt the sting of his master's words. He stopped, the rain still pouring on their heads and shoulders. Inlay lifted his mask. His cool and tired silver eyes locked onto Ellicard's tired magenta ones. Ellicard, my master, listen to me. Whatever doubts you have in your life, your actions are praised by the true people that care for you. And love you, Inlay said. Ellicard stared down at his muddy feet, slightly lightheaded from his loss of blood. He raised the student on the philosophies of his master Legion, the same philosophies that turned him into the efficient assassin that slew a king. Inlay was the prime example of a perfect rabbit. Inlay, if you were asked to, Would you kill the person that you were closest to? Inlay smiled weakly. Closest to him. His family was long gone, and the only person he truly felt affection for was the person he was holding in the downpour. He loved Ellicard more than just as a brother. He saw the black rabbits in light of chivalry and servitude. He yearned for a way to mix his love for Ellicard with his love for his clan, a sentiment, it seemed, that Jetta did not share. Ellicard, a blade is only as sharp as the rabbit wielding it. Try to remember this, master. Do not let the heart lead where the mind will not follow. Inlay put a gentle hand upon his master's cool, wet cheek. He slowly moved his unmasked face closer to Ellicard's. Unless the heart leads you to me. Inlay whispered, raindrops bouncing off his nose. Ellicard was exhausted, locked within Inlay's hypnotic charm. He had feelings for his student, but could not requite the feelings Inlay had for him. Inlay, I can't. Inlay moved slowly until he could feel Ellicard's breath. With his other hand, he removed Ellicard's soaked-through hood. Inlay. Ellicard's worn eyes sunk within the shadow elves. A moment in time froze for these two men. Guys, over here. I made a fire, Jetta called from a short distance to the east. Let's replace those bandages, Ellicard. Inlay quickly moved away from Ellicard, annoyance clearly on his face from Jetta's ill-timed interruptions. He refastened his mask and whispered into Ellicard's ears. I will wait for you. Under a thick canopy of branches and leaves, the fire blazed. Ellicard slept peacefully by its warmth. Fresh bandages hugged his ribs. Inlay watched the elf with a sense of fondness as Jetta cleaned his wounds. I can tell that you care for him very much, Jetta said, gesturing over to her best friend. Inlay grimaced from a rush of pain as an alcohol-soaked cloth burned a tender gash in his arm. More than you'll ever understand, Inlay responded with a slight chill. Jetta was briefly silent, taken aback by the insult. I've known Ellicard since we were children. He's my best friend. He's like an older brother to me. I think I understand. Inlay turned to face her fiercely. Then why do you torture him so? Why won't you let him be? What are you talking about? I would never hurt Ellicard. You play with his heart and mind with your heresy. You think I can't see the turmoil he's in? Inlay snapped. Jetta bit her lip, her heart rising in her throat. I'm sorry. I didn't know I was hurting him. I only wanted to help him. Inlay sighed heavily. Jetta, I don't know what Ellicard was like as a child, but he is a rabbit now. It's one of his greatest achievements, and when we return, he'll be honored as our first blade. But he won't be able to function if you keep twisting his conscience with these thoughts. Twisting? I'm trying to be rational. I want Ellicard to... I suggest you keep your ideas and philosophies to yourself. For Ellicard's sake, and for yours, Inlay said, interrupting her. A silence cut deep between the two. Only the soft pattering of the rain bouncing off the leaves could be heard. Jetta had only wanted to help Ellicard. It had never crossed her mind that she was torturing him. No, she could not be torturing him. She was purging the infection from his mind. Ellicard still saw the good in her words, but it was clear that arguing with Inlay would get her nowhere. She needed to keep her path steady and illuminated, for Inlay was like the rest of the black rabbits, an obstacle that would keep her from moving forward. Get some rest, Jetta. We have a long road ahead of us. Jetta finished tying off the bandage around his arm and lightly smiled at Inlay. I must stay strong for Ellicard. I must. The clan roared in celebration as the three returning victors entered the retreat. Ellicard made his way to Legion, his high blade, and knelt in respect. Master, it is done. What do you feel, Ellicard? The clan went silent and awaited his response. Ellicard paused. He was reminded of the last time he stood here. He was asked the same question before. The proper response would have been the same as before. Satisfaction. But this was not what he felt. This was the biggest mission of his life, a kill that would raise the bar for all rabbits. This was it. The moment in his life he had worked toward, to be respected, praised, loved. And yet he didn't want this. Did Jetta's words have so much weight in them? He tried to reflect on Inlay's words instead. His student, a brother in arms, the friend he could always count on. Inlay understood everything he was going through. They fought and bled for the same cause. Everything he built, Inlay strived for and supported. Inlay's words were what really should have held the most weight in his heart. Then why were Jetta's more important to him? Ellicard, we're all waiting, Legion said, breaking through the awkward silence. Satisfaction, Ellicard said, rather mechanically. Jetta hid an annoyed sigh, while Inlay started a cheer for Ellicard. The compound erupted again. Ellicard stood, admittedly pleased with the excitement. Legion leaned into his ear. We have much to discuss about your future. Yes, but first there is some business that must be dealt with. Ellicard nodded before scanning the many faces of the clan. Ellicard snaked through the crowd until he was standing opposite of Malady. Malady was leaning against a pillar. He begrudgingly smiled. Welcome home, Ellicard. It is good to see you alive and well. Ellicard lifted his chin in displeasure. No thanks to you. Malady scoffed. What do you mean? We all wished you a fortunate mission and a safe return. Enough with your lies and this scheming. You sent your apprentice ahead to tell the king of our mission and laid a trap for us. Ellicard shouted furiously. A resounding gasp fell over the onlooking crowd. Legion pushed forward. Ellicard, is this true? It is, Ellicard said sternly, crossing his arms. Malady sneered. Quite an allegation. Ellicard pulled a bloody magenta scarf from his garb and dropped it on the ground. I took this from your traitor of a student after I spilled her guts. Malady scowled at the sight of Tesha's scarf, but gathered his composure. Clearly, Tesha sought to sabotage you out of jealousy of your success. Either way, I had nothing to do with it. Liar! Ellicard yelled aggressively. Legion got between the two. Ellicard, enough. Legion turned to Malady. Your petty rivalry is tearing this clan apart. Rivalry? Rivals are equal. You're just some stooge my mother chose to be my sparring partner, growled Malady. Leandre didn't choose you because you would have made the weak leader. You see that, don't you? You hold on to your childish grudges and let them taint your future. Legion spat. His frustration with his blade brother flared into anger. Don't you dare mention her. You want to end this. I would challenge you to a final duel. But how would that look dueling the High Blade? However, I will challenge Ellicard instead. Ellicard's eyes widened in fear. Legion pushed Ellicard behind him. No, not Ellicard. Malady flashed his teeth. You don't want to end this rivalry? Legion glanced over to see Raijin standing by his quarters. He made a small nod as if approving Legion's future actions. Legion unsheathed his massive blade and thrust it into the stone ground. I am your blade brother before I am your high blade. It is my duty to end this before any more needless blood is shed. In 2 days, we fight in front of everyone. To the death. Malady drew a sword from his back and thrust it into the ground, inches from Legion's. Accepted. Chapter 32. Coda sat among the vast collection of tomes and scrolls in the library of the Verdant Academy. Books of ancient histories, lore, and magical theories piled up like a miniature fortress around the young elven prince. His familiar slept peacefully at his feet. His once broken hand had nearly fully healed. Coda noted that this must have been a side effect of working with the Magi. You know, there isn't really anything about the origins of the Mage Council here, Wild Eye, Coda whispered to the wolf, not really expecting a response of any sort from her. He continued his train of thought all the same. I mean, there's a fake description here and there of how the council was formed, but most of these stories are just accounts of the Arcana War that discuss the council's role in it. All of it is also clearly biased toward the mages. Wild-Eye opened a single eyelid and arched her brow, clearly a little annoyed by the interruption from her afternoon nap. But there isn't really anything here that tells me who the first mages were or how they gained access to the Magi.
That is because they don't want to teach that the first mages stole from Nashun.
A familiar voice cut through the solitude of the library. Zyle hobbled into the massive gallery of tomes, gripping his gnarled staff tightly. He looked around at the thousands of ancient books with disgust scrawled across his aged face. He had always reviled the notion of confining knowledge to boring books and delicate scrolls. The forest is where all knowledge was meant to be kept, not some man-made structure.
Grandchild, Toll told me this is where I would find you.
Zyle spoke with a heavy rasp. He was growing older, and any youthful energy he managed to hold on to was fleeting. Grandfather, this is a most welcome surprise. What are you doing here? Coda asked, pushing the stack of books out of his way. Wild-Eye sprung to life and leapt up to lick the elder. Zyle patted the wolf on its head, whispering in the ancient woven tongue to calm her down.
My son is dead. Nashun's forest may be timeless, but alas, the world around it still withers. I've come to pay my respects and to take you back home.
Coda sighed with a grim expression on his face. I can't. Wild-Eye circled around Zyle and whined at Coda.
Your wolf knows it's time to leave this place behind. Come, we will mourn your father and continue your training together. We've lost far too much time.
Coda lowered his head. Being the Arcane Guardian had always been his future, his destiny. However, ever since he left the safety of the forest and came to be a part of his father's world, life had made new plans for him. He was becoming a mage, and more importantly, he was to become king. I can't go with you. Zyle limped closer to his grandchild. He fidgeted with the fine threads of Coda's green mage robes. He pursed his lips, eyeing Coda with disappointment.
You can't, or you won't.
Coda lifted his head to meet his grandfather's gaze. I am to become the Mage King of Longwhisper. My people need me here. I won't. Zyle sneered.
A mage. Such a vile thing to be. Mages are the complete opposite of everything I raised you to be. How can you do this to me, Coda? And a king? King of what? These elves do not need a king. They need no leader. They need a forest and their traditions. You are lost, my grandchild, but I am here to lead you back to Nashun. Now forget these foolish and childish dreams, and come home.
The mages are good for this world. They have taught me the things you refuse to teach me. The Magi needs to be explored and used for the good of the people. It needs to be shared, not hidden. Zyle shook his head and scowled.
You need to be retaught, grandchild. Those mages have corrupted you. Now come, child, enough with your silly games.
Everyone wants me to be pulled their way, but never have I realized the responsibilities that were truly put before me. Grandfather, more than ever the people of this land look for a leader. They willingly chose to leave the outside world behind because, as you said, the outside world isn't timeless. Everything changes. This includes the Magi. I chose to become a mage, to learn how to better protect my people, and I will become their king to better lead them. My parents sought to create more than a new legacy. They had a vision of their united tribes. One banner for one united people. My father died as a martyr for this cause, and I will not allow his sacrifice to be in vain. Coda knelt to hug Wild-Eye. I'm sorry, girl, but our fates are no longer intertwined. Zyle looked baffled.
What of your responsibilities as Arcane Guardian? Who is to take my place?
Coda shook his head and spread his arms out, spinning around. Grandfather, you already left Nashun. Travel the lands. There are more than just Dawn Edge out there. Zyle turned and walked away in complete frustration. Once at the doorway, he called for Wild-Eye.
Come, Wild-Eye. Your pack will be overjoyed to see you again.
Wild-Eye slowly walked forth, but halted to look at Coda. Her eyes flared before she trotted back to the side of her companion. Zyle nodded in approval.
Take care of him. He makes foolish decisions, so he'll need you to protect him.
Within the court of Lost Dawns gathered all the nobles of the 8 tribes dressed in their finest clothes. They lined up in 2 columns, lowering their heads in elegant bows to their prince as he walked slowly by. His blue-furred familiar strode by his side, decorated with fine jewelry. Wild-Eye had a bracelet on her right leg, and a gold and silver linked collar draped around her neck. Coda wore finely threaded deep purple and green robes. A golden silk cape hung from his left shoulder. He bore the amulet of his late father that marked him as Dawn Edge royalty. On his back was sheathed an ornate sword encrusted with various rare gems. As Coda reached the throne, he placed the sword across his lap after seating. Toll delicately picked up the ornate wooden crown from the throne and hovered it like a halo just above Coda's head. It was carved from the elder tree. High priests had inscribed an ancient angelic prayer in the wood with golden runes that read, "Eternally I will serve my kingdom. Eternally I am a student of life. Eternally I will seek your wisdom. Eternally I will avoid all strife." Coda closed his eyes, grasping at a fleeting memory of himself on the bank of a pond reading a book of ancient tales with his wolf lying beside him. He opened his eyes to recite his oath. "Wrens, be my witness, as I wear this crown, protecting the smallest farm to the largest town. Bestow upon me your perception and foresight, and forever I will represent the lost dawn's light." An ovation swept the room as Toll placed the crown of Long Whisper on Coda's head. A new king had risen. King Coda paced in his study, listening to a new report on his fledgling project. "My king, as predicted, the people have signed up in droves for your new military. The people are tired of being victims and wish to take a more active role in protecting the land that they love." "And what of the White Cloaks?" Coda asked frankly. Toll unfolded a letter from Marcus. "The Long Whisper division of the Guard of the White Cloaks will be dissolved. Only a few White Cloaks will remain to act as drill instructors for the new military. Guildmaster Marcus Newson will personally lend his skills and knowledge as both a military advisor and lead instructor." Coda nodded, pacing around the tribal council table. "Any news of the Black Rabbits, particularly the ones responsible for my father's murder?" "Our wolf riders haven't returned. No doubt they were slain or have lost the trail," Tull said with a low voice. Coda nodded, slightly vexed by the lack of information. "Tull, how do they get their recruits?" "According to our Black Rabbit informant, they recruit from small towns and villages in exchange for protecting those towns. We never had enough White Cloaks to protect those areas, so they have had an easy time recruiting. Make sure to send our newest soldier to protect any community from which the Black Rabbits might pull recruits. I hate to sound cruel, but if we can't catch them, we'll starve them," Coda said, disgusted by the image of a starving animal. Tull nodded and grinned. "As you say, my king." Chapter 33. The first snow began to fall during Avron's funeral. The White Cloaks drove a ceremonial dagger into their fallen commander's coffin one by one, making an echoing thunk. Wicker winced at the piercing sound of each thud. Then it was his turn. Wicker limped over, supporting his weight on a cane. The silver trim of his white tunic shimmered from the small shafts of light that pierced the dreary clouds. Before driving the blade into the coffin, he held still. Light flurries danced around him as he whispered his final goodbye. "Farewell, my captain, my friend, my brother." He struggled with the words and fought with everything in him to keep from collapsing on the coffin, if only to cling to his brother one last time. Keeping his composure, he slammed the dagger and slowly limped to his place alongside his father. As the coffin was lowered into the ground, the White Cloaks drew their swords to salute a hero. The Mystic Fang Tavern was a popular destination in Lost Dawns for the White Cloaks. Its location was a short walk from their headquarters. It opened early and closed late. The bartender often gave cloaks a discount, and today was no different. Cold drinks were passed around as the cloaks told very tall tales of Avron's exploits and embarrassing deeds. Those who knew and loved him celebrated his life with a long night of stories, laughing, and drinking. Surely his spirit lived on in their revelry. Marcus drank silently, not looking up to make eye contact with his only remaining son. Wicker did the same. They may as well have been complete strangers. Were it not for their similar features and the blood that bound them, they would have been. Wicker moved to break the uncomfortable silence, but he was unexpectedly interrupted.
"I hear you fought hard,"
said Marcus, still not looking up from the untouched foam head on his ale. Wicker opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Moments passed before he was able to speak. "Not hard enough, apparently."
"I guess not."
Marcus shrugged. Wicker had trouble reading him. He wasn't depressed, just disappointed. Next time, father, Wicker started, but all that was on his mind was his own failure and his hatred for Ellicard. The elven assassin was directly linked to his biggest failures in life. All he wanted was to watch the Black Rabbit clan burn. His heart and soul were consumed by visions of Ellicard's lifeless corpse swinging quietly from the gallows. But it was not really vengeance he sought in this, but his own redemption.
There won't be a next time.
Marcus spat before rising from his seat. He whacked the iron stein a few times with a fork from the table. The bar quickly settled down until it was dead silent. Marcus looked around before making his announcement.
I have something to tell you all, lads. This seems like hard news to say on top of an already sober day, but I have informed that King Koda will be releasing us from our duties.
A mixture of worries and questions erupted in Mystic Fang. Marcus clarified.
Long Whisper is putting together their own military. I'll be personally overseeing the training of this army alongside a select few of you. We are to act as drill instructors, but we will no longer be needed for protection.
Marcus eyed his son's distraught face.
Protection. We failed miserably in that regard, and Lost Dawns has taken note of that.
Wicker clenched his teeth in anger. Father, I volunteer to instruct the elves. Marcus ignored his son.
The rest of you will be reassigned to other countries. This division has been disbanded. Finish your drinks. You will be contacted if you will be needed to train the future soldiers of Lost Dawns.
Marcus placed his drink on the table and walked out of the tavern with Wicker limping after him. Father, I said I volunteer to be a drill instructor, Wicker shouted at his back. Marcus stopped abruptly and stood still. Snow crept down slowly from the sky and bathed in the glow of the street lamps.
No. You're going home to our cabin in Long Whisper.
Father, my leg will heal, and I'll be able to perform any... Wicker begged his father for another chance to prove to himself that he was worth the effort put into him, but his cries fell on deaf ears.
No,
Marcus interrupted, raising his voice.
I'm retiring you.
Wicker was taken aback. Tears formed in his eyes. He hung his head low, choking out his words. Why? Why do you hate me? I already know it's my fault Avern is dead. If I trained harder, I could have saved him. If I listened to his lessons, I could have saved the king. Please, give me another chance to make up for my failures. Please, I need this. Marcus walked away, calling back to Wicker in a low voice.
Pack up and go home. You're dismissed.
Wicker slammed the side of his fist on the tavern wall. Everything he'd ever worked for and loved was gone. Chapter 34. 30 years ago, Raijin Leafsong failed at his attempt to assassinate Jalen Dawnedge. Raijin was spared, but was exiled from Long Whisper, never to be heard from again. 10 years passed before Raijin formed an alliance from 3 elves from the renowned warrior clans who had refused to join Jalen's new kingdom. They were Killid Windspear, Ronos Pathrunner, and Leandra Nighthunter. Together with the newly named Silent Master, these 4 elves created the shadowy Black Rabbit clan. These assassins would wreak havoc on Long Whisper and slowly grew in number. Killid, Ronos, and Leandra admired Raijin for his ideals and boldness. Over time, Leandra fell madly in love with him. Her passion for him flourished, and though Raijin returned no emotion, he still sired a child with her all the same. Malady was born. Years passed, and Killid and Ronos left the clan to pursue their own ambitions elsewhere in the world. Raijin saw this as an unforgivable betrayal. With the loss of 2 of his most trusted friends and advisors, Raijin grew paranoid of whom he could trust. He created 2 new ranks for him to oversee that would serve to enforce his laws: High Blade and First Blade. A young Malady, about the age of 13, sweated profusely as his raw knuckles beat into the tree. He knew he needed to train hard to impress his mother, and even harder to impress his father. His skills as a fighter came naturally, but it was the praise of his parents that he really worked for. A familiar voice called out from the woods. Malady, where are you? I have excellent news for you. Malady smirked. His mother had the news he had been waiting to hear since he had been told of the Silent Master's new ranks. Finally, his mother would bestow upon him his birthright, and he would finally sit at his father's side, lording over the clan. I am here, mother. You wish to see me? Leandra was a toned elf. She wore a black leather tunic with a violet belt strap crossing her chest. On her back were 2 claymores. She had the strength and skill to wield both in each hand, a feat that most men would only dream of. By her side was a small child, a bit younger than Malady. His frame was small for his age, even for a new recruit. He was an elf, like himself. He had light silver hair that had been cut short, and his eyes were a deep red. Mother, who's this recruit with you? Malady asked, confused plastered on his face. Malady, this is Legion. He's going to be your sparring partner, Leandra said, pushing forth the small Legion. Sparring partner? I don't need a sparring partner. My skills are nearly perfect, Malady scoffed. Well, I think it could use some work. Also, Legion could learn a thing or two from you. Being able to teach is an aspect of leadership you'll need to have if you plan on being High Blade. Leandra placed a sheathed sword into the arms of Legion before stepping away. Legion held a blank stare on his face, not knowing what he was in for. Well, what's your story, kid? Where do you come from? Malady asked, trying to make the best out of his situation. Legion stared at his sword, hesitant to speak at first. My father gave me up to pay off his gambling debt. Your father sounds like a bastard, Malady said with a disgusted smile. But you'll be missing him once we get started. Draw your blade, kid. My name is Legion, the young boy sneered. Malady rushed at his sparring partner, swinging his blade, disarming Legion and legs sweeping under his feet. Legion crashed to the ground, and Malady pointed his sword under Legion's chin. Learn to hold your blade right, and then we'll see about you earning your name. Years would pass, and Malady grew strong. Legion grew stronger. Malady was no longer in a position to teach Legion. Now they were truly equals. Far away from the Black Rabbit retreat, the soft glow of a campfire blazed under a starry night. Malady and Legion sat together. Across from them stood Leandra Nighthunter, regaling them with tales of how the Black Rabbits came to be, and how the warrior tribes once lived wild in the forests of the land. She sat down, crossing her legs. Opening a large leather bag, she took out a set of swords wrapped in animal pelts. One was much longer than the others. You two have grown in these last few years. My son has proven himself a natural teacher, while Legion, you have proven to me that you are worthy to be called a son of my own. You are brothers now, not only in arms, but like the old ways, I wish to make you Blade Brothers. Blade Brothers? Malady asked, a look of whimsy in his eyes. When one of you succeeds, both of you succeed. When one of you fails, you both fail. You will be brothers in skill and in soul. You will become one. Legion grinned wildly as Malady nodded with approval at his new blade brother. Leandra unwrapped the swords, giving the long sword to Legion, while Malady received a set of 5 arming swords. Legion, I want to train you in the form of the giant's blade. You were weak once, barely able to wield your sword. Now I will teach you to use a claymore, the choice weapon of the night hunters. I will use it well, Leandra, Legion said, stoically. She turned to Malady, passing the 5 blades to him. You have always shown a prowess for blade skills. Now I shall test you with the form of the many blade. Using each blade quickly and precisely, you will throw off your opponents and give you an edge in the heat of battle. Mother, I am honored, Malady said, bowing his head. My sons, you are both on the path to greatness. Malady led Legion through the shadowy woods. They dashed from branch to branch, surrounded by a sea of leaves that reflected the moonlight from the rain that came before. Both were dressed in dark leathers, their deep purple cloaks dancing behind them. Malady, when will you tell me where you are taking me? Legion called ahead. Brother, tonight you will become a true Black Rabbit. I am to oversee this, Malady shouted back, a smile strewn wide across his face. Legion had been training for years, but had never been regarded as a true Black Rabbit by his peers and teachers. All despite his great skill and potential, Malady stopped just shy of a small tavern on the outreaches of a small farming village. The tavern was a shoddy building, Its walls were made of wood that was splintered and rotting. Its thatched roof had holes poked through to let plumes of smoke billow out. The light shining through the window lit up the silhouettes of patrons having a good time inside. Malady, are we on a mission? Legion asked as he tried to find a reason for them to be there. Malady grinned. Come, brother. Follow my lead. Once inside, the two assassins found the pub full of life. Whores and drunks danced and drank and made merry. But the two were more interested in an older man who sat a deep super, a patchy peppered beard. His eyes were tired and half closed. His tunic was filthy, and his vest had splotches of food stains on it. He looked up and burped loudly as Legion and Malady moved toward him. This is him. Grab him and bring him outside around back, Malady told Legion. Who is he? Legion inquired. A weed, Malady said. Quickly. Behind the tavern, Legion threw the old drunk to the ground. Malady massaged Legion's shoulders. Are you ready for your first kill, brother? Legion shot a wild glance at Malady. What? Kill him? Why? This man is a stain on society, much like the stains on his vest. Who is he? Legion asked, watching the man stumble around before falling to his bottom. Legion, you don't recognize him. Has it been that long for you? Legion gave Malady a curious look. His blade brother motioned for Legion to study the man. Legion crouched down to examine the features of the worn and weathered elven man. Slowly, it began to dawn on Legion who he had been sent to assassinate. This is my father. Yes, my brother. It seemed only right that you were to be the one to kill him. Legion backed away, shaking his head. I can't do this. I can't kill my own father. Malady pulled Legion back, keeping an arm around his shoulder. Legion, he stopped being your father when he gave you up. He sold you to settle his gambling debts. This man is a leech. He's worth nothing. He's good for nothing. Malady kicked the drunkard backwards before asking him, Do you know who we are? Do you know who he is? Malady pointed at Legion. The man hiccuped as he wobbly looked Legion over. Should I? Legion pulled down the mask that covered his mouth and pushed his face into his father's. Look at me. Really look. Do you know who I am? The man shook his head. Malady drew a sword and put it to the throat of the man. Do you recall now? The man's eyes widened as he felt the gravity of his situation. I don't know him. I don't know him. Legion grabbed the man by the shirt and lifted him into the air, bringing his face so close to the man's that he could smell the rancid odor of booze on his breath. You drove my mother away. You sold me to settle your gambling debts. You drank your way into a bottle, and your whole life is nothing but a failure. I always wondered what I did to deserve the life you forced me into. I was 10. 10 when you sold me to a clan of assassins. 6 when you beat my mother half to death because you lost our house in a game of cards. The man began to sob. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Who am I? Legion shouted, enraged by the memory that boiled in his mind. You're my son, Legion. Legion dropped his father to his knees before swiftly drawing his blade. No. Now I'm the man who's going to kill you, Legion said before viciously parting his father's head from his body. Malady watched as Legion still shivered with raw anger. Brother, how does it feel? Do you have retribution? Legion was breathing heavily as he turned to look at Malady. Alana has given me purpose. Legion cleaned and sheathed his blade. And now, she has given me vindication. Malady nodded. A night to remember, brother. As Legion and Malady became adults, it grew clear to Leandra that Legion was surpassing Malady. Not only she, but the Silent Master saw this as well. In time, no matter how hard Malady pushed himself, he could not garner the same praise that Legion was showered with by his parents. When the time came to choose a high blade, the two blade brothers knelt in the shadowy presence of the reclusive Silent Master. Leandra stood by his side.
Leandra, you have shown much attention to these two elves. Is one to be our high blade?
Leandra pursed her lips, pacing before her two sons. My master, one was born with promise but has not shown that he can live up to his own potential. Melody's head shot up in surprise, a baffled look on his face. Leandra continued, while the other started with absolutely nothing, but clawed his way to greatness.
Mother, you would choose Legion over me.
I am the son of Raijin Leafsong.
I am entitled to the title of High Blade. It is my birthright.
Malady blurted out. He was completely livid by his mother's apparent betrayal.
Birthrights are a fool's delusion,
barked Raijin, his voice cracked through Malady's gripes. Leandra helped Legion rise to his feet. I choose you to be High Blade, Legion. Legion backed away, shaking his head. Please, Leandra. Silent Master, I do not want this. My bond with my brother is too sacred to me to soil it by taking away something that I know he has wanted since he was a child. Please, choose someone else. Legion bowed before them. Leandra looked crestfallen. You are perfect for this role, Legion. It is you that we want. Legion refused once more. I cannot accept this title. The Silent Master looked up to Leandra.
Who else?
There are two humans, Blade Sisters. They show much promise. They are younger than Legion and Malady, but in time will be strong. Avalon shows slightly more initiative. Veda, the other, is fiercely loyal to her. I recommend Avalon to be High Blade, with Veda as First Blade. The Silent Master nodded before leering at Malady.
Leave my sight. You disappoint me, my son.
You couldn't share a moment's glory for your own blade, brother.
Pathetic.
Malady ground his teeth and balled his fists. He sprouted up and grabbed Legion by the collar of his tunic. You have embarrassed me. I challenge you to a duel. Only blood will make this right. Malady, brother, please. I never meant to hurt you. Legion cried out. Anguish quivered in his voice. Malady bared his teeth.
You will duel me. You owe me this.
Leandra pulled the two apart. Legion, duel Malady. End this pettiness. It defiles the title of Blade Brother. As you wish, Leandra. Legion sighed. In the opening in the forest where the two boys first sparred, the two Blade Brothers stood facing one another. Off to the side, Leandra stood next to the newly appointed High Blade and First Blade. Avalon stepped forward. May this duel, no matter its results, end this quarrel. You may begin. Malady drew two blades and lunged forward, unleashing a series of slashes aimed at Legion. Legion sidestepped and circled around, landing a clean kick into Malady's back that sent him rolling to the ground. Legion had not even drawn his blade yet. Malady scrambled to his feet and reached for another set of swords. He twirled them in a skillful fashion, then thrust them both forward at Legion. Legion dodged and responded with a quick elbow to his blade brother's throat. Malady fell to his knees, choking for air. The sound of steel being slowly released from its scabbard rang out through the silence of the battlefield. Legion had finally drawn his blade. You know that I'm stronger than you. Please, submit, brother. There is no need for this to go any further. Infuriated, Malady dove at Legion, swiping his swords but striking only air. Legion lifted his sword as if it had the weight of a feather and gracefully slashed into Malady's left thigh. Legion quickly brought down another strike that sank deep into Malady's right thigh. Malady collapsed onto the ground, unable to stand. He screamed with a primal rage. Submit. Let this be over. Let us put this foolishness behind us, brother. Legion repeated. I have no father, no mother, and now I have no brother. Kill me, Malady sneered as he threw his blades to the ground and lowered his head. Legion's hand shook as the edge of his blade hovered over Malady's neck. Now his sword was too heavy to lift, much like his heart. With a single swipe, Legion sliced a gash across Melody's eye and walked away.
I'm sorry, brother, but I can't.
Chapter 35. Ellicard winced as Jeddah slowly removed the blood-soaked bandages from his side. Dried blood stretched and broke as it was peeled from the surface of his skin.
I swear to Alu, Ellicard, if you break your stitches one more time, I'll kill you myself, Jeddah said as she examined the slowly healing wound. Ellicard gave her a wry look. Alu?
Jeddah glanced around quickly before attempting to cover her misstep. Alana. I meant Alana. Ellicard prodded her curiously.
Your medical instructor told me you can speak the angel language fluently. My master taught me a bit, but I doubt I could speak it so freely. Where did you learn such a skill? Jeddah sighed, remembering the old priest of Alu that passed through Ravenshore.
He was an elderly man, not dressed in fanciful religious garb, but in beggar's rags. Had it not been for her kind ways to offer the man a free meal, she would have never learned of his true nature. I found a teacher in a kind old man. She paused, and reminiscent wonder filled her eyes. Ambrose of the Wandering Winds, a nomad of the cloth. He passed through Ravenshire one rainy autumn's eve, and I had the good fortune of offering him what small comforts I could. Ellicard was captivated by the idea of such a stranger. He took you as an apprentice? Jeddah tightened the bandages around Ellicard's wounds. He preached kindness, compassion, and forgiveness. He passed on to me Alu's words and her lore. Through him, I learned to speak angelic. Jeddah trailed off, lost in a gentler time. All useless to me in this now. The angel of mercy is but a weakness in the eyes of the angel of death. Ellicard lifted up her chin to expose her eyes swelling with tears. Hush now, Jeddah. It's your job to show strength to those that need it most. Orlana values that in her rabbits. Trev alana zesh alue oblivis, Jeddah whispered in angelic. Her words went unnoticed by Ellicard as he limped away. Even death will seek mercy in the end. Ellicard knelt before Legion and Raijin within the quarters of the Silent Master. Ellicard was still covered in bandages, and despite his weariness, he was more than excited for this moment.
Ellicard, as you know, Veda has yet to return. She is either dead or has joined her traitorous blade sister. Either way, a new first blade must be named,
Legion said, turning to the Silent Master, who nodded approvingly from the shadows.
You have shown tremendous growth, prowess, finesse, wisdom, and patience, all of which are required of a first blade.
Legion took out his own blade and passed it to Ellicard.
Rabbit, will you be my first blade?
Ellicard gazed into his master's eyes. He cut his hand on Legion's sword and smeared the blood on his own blade. I accept my high blade. The clan gathered around the two combatants in the center of the compound. The sun was setting, sundering the azure sky. Ellicard stood beside Raijin, anxious to see his master display the legendary skills he had always known him to have. Even so, a small part of him was afraid that Malady's malice would give him an advantage in this particular bout. Skill versus drive. It could go either way, and Ellicard knew that. Raijin held a hand to quiet the clan's collective chatter.
Legion and Malady, this rivalry has corrupted the unison of this clan. It must cease for the sake of the Black Rabbit's future.
Legion nodded, unsheathing his long sword. Malady turned and shot a grim smile at his silent master. You were my father, but you never treated me as a son. No, that honor was given to him. Well, father, I will destroy everything you love. I will crush him beneath my feet, and when he begs for forgiveness, I will cut out his heart and give it to you. Legion shook his head in disbelief at the statement.
You never understood, brother.
Malady drew two swords from his back. You dare to speak to me as if I don't understand, Legion. I watched as you snaked your way into my life and into my family. I let it happen. I was a fool.
but I shall correct my mistakes. No, it is my mistake to correct. I should have killed you when you begged me to.
Legion roared as he ran at Malady, dragging his edge along the stone ground. A lightning-fast swing connected the dual swords in a deafening clatter of steel. Legion recoiled, swinging another hefty blow at Malady's side. Malady parried, countering with his own attempt for Legion's left shoulder. Legion leapt backwards and hacked savagely into the ground, creating a thunderous shockwave of air that drove straight for Malady. Malady rolled to the right as the wave collided into a crowd of dodging assassins. Malady snorted with anger as he lunged toward his opponent, spinning his swords like whirling buzzsaws. The deadly attacks ripped at Legion, catching him in the upper arm. Legion backed away, lowering his blade to examine his wound. Sneering, he charged forth with a flurry of excessive swings, each deflected by Malady's incredibly fast rotating weapons. Legion saw an opening as his claymore clanged off a deflection. Thrusting his sword into the ground, Legion heaved himself up and over the blade's guard and landed a solid kick that sent Malady flying to the ground. Recovering his blade, Legion swept his sword, knocking his blade brother's dual swords out of reach. Malady windmilled his legs, spinning himself back to his feet before sliding 3 new swords into his hands.
You haven't lost a step, Legion, Malady said, admittedly impressed with his blade brother's prowess.
Legion rested his gigantic long sword on a shoulder.
As well with you, brother. In fact, you've greatly improved.
Malady grinned ruthlessly before taking off and twisting a series of slices with his 3 blades. Each sparked as they clashed against Legion's sword. Legion deftly swiped upwards with his swords and then combined it with a piercing thrust. Malady sidestepped and parried the attack before spin-kicking into the small of Legion's backs. The high blade collided into the ground, but tumbled to recover, kneeling as he caught his breath.
This ends now, Malady.
Malady dashed forward, mustering his energy to increase his speed. Legion lifted his blade to counter the reckless attack, but Malady knocked Legion's sword downward with the flat of his own blade. With all of his might, Malady drove 2 of his blades into Legion's shoulders and laughed wickedly. Legion gasped in complete agony as he struggled with the pain. Malady twisted both the impaling blades as Legion screamed. Clasping his hands around Legion's throat, Malady smiled viciously. Legion grunted as he grabbed a dagger from his opponent's belt and drove into Malady's side. Malady collapsed backwards, clutching his new wound. Both men sat on the blood-spattered ground, heaving, staring at each other.
I took you under my wing. I took you in as my friend, my brother. I am the reason why you are so great. Me!
Malady hissed, too exhausted to raise his voice. Legion swayed as he struggled to stand. He stumbled as he walked over to Malady and grabbed him by the collar.
Everything I achieved,
he huffed as he began to punch Malady sluggishly in the face,
was because of you. You pushed me. You drove me. You were my ambition. You were my sword.
Legion increased his speed as blood sloshed from the raw facial wounds his fist left on Malady's face.
You are my heart. You are my soul.
Legion released a half-conscious Malady into a pool of his own blood.
You are my blade brother.
Quelled by the emotion, Malady flashed back to the days of meeting Legion, his training with him, laughing, friendship, brotherly love.
Where did it all go so wrong, blade brother?
Legion stood over the defeated Malady.
When you held your ego over the love we had.
I betrayed my clan. I betrayed you, all for my envy. I am deeply sorry, my brother. Forgive me.
Malady, I can forgive you, but this clan cannot.
Malady choked up bubbles of a crimson liquid.
Leave me to die. It's all I deserve now.
Legion removed the 2 blades from his shoulder, grimacing greatly. He scanned over the eyes of his kin before finally resting his sight on the silent master. Turning back to the surrendered Malady, Legion sheathed his claymore.
This clan has seen too much bloodshed between rabbits these last few days. Malady, you will leave the Black Rabbits and this land. You are exiled for all eternity.
Malady closed his eyes.
Do you remember when I told you to kill your father?
Legion listened to the wind whistling past his ear.
Always.
Malady turned his head on its side, coughing and wheezing greatly.
You said Alana gave you purpose and vindication.
What does she give you now?
Clemency.
Even death will seek mercy in the end. Chapter 36. The wood cracked as it split in two. Wicker tossed the pieces into a small woodpile. Spring was settling into the void left by the dreary winter. However, the wind was still cold, and unlike his shivering body, his heavy heart and bitter thoughts didn't need a warm hearth to melt away the lingering of the past season. A set of footsteps crunched the dead leaves. Wicker paid the new presence no heed. He was neither a stranger or a welcome guest.
It has been a while, my son,
Marcus said. His voice broke the long silence between the two. Wicker ignored him, grabbing a handful of logs as he headed for the cabin. Marcus struggled with the awkward silence.
Let me help you with those.
Do as you wish. Wicker spoke flatly, with much disdain in his voice. Marcus grabbed the young man's shoulder, forcing Wicker to face him.
Listen, there's no need to make this harder for me than it already is.
Wicker dropped the logs to the ground, outraged. Harder for you? Do you even remember how you left me? Marcus bit his lip as he stressfully combed his hair with his fingers.
Wicker, son, I did what needed to be done. I did.
You did what needed to be done? Wicker blurted out the words angrily. Do you have any idea how that affected me? You not only shut me out of my closure, but you destroyed any way for me to cope with my pain. My pain, father. My mother is dead. My brother is dead. And the only thing that kept me going was the white cloaks, and you took it all away. You did what needed to be done. Can you even grasp how that sounds to me? Marcus was silent. Wicker's eyes showed an edge of fury and sadness. Answer me.
I didn't want to lose the last member of my family. Vivian, your mother, wouldn't forgive me if I lost both of you. I just wanted to protect you. I didn't know how to act, how to cope with losing Averin. I didn't mean to lose you as well.
Marcus choked with the last words.
Wicker, I'm so sorry that I caused you so much pain.
Wicker's scowl turned to a weak smile as he went to hug his father. We're all that's left, but we're not alone. They watch over us in spirit. Can't you feel them? Marcus tightened his squeeze.
Every day, my son. Every day.
Wicker placed a cup of strong coffee in front of his father. He himself drank it light with cream and a single teaspoon of sugar, but his father was a breed of hardened souls and drank it black. Wicker sat at the old oak table wondering what really brought the former guild leader to the cabin. How goes the training of the troops? Do the elves learn fast? How strong are Long Whisper's forces becoming? Marcus gulped a large swig of his coffee, taking little notice of the scalding temperature.
Long Whisper is done being the victims. They grow fast and strong. Many new soldiers have been placed among each village and town in the country. There hasn't been reports of Black Rabbit sightings yet, but it's been 3 months. No doubt they will be recruiting soon, now that the roads have been cleared of the winter snow.
Marcus paused, eyeing his son, waiting for the right moment to tell him the other set of news.
Elisa.
What about the rabbits? Wicker sneered, still clearly upset with her and her lack of cooperation.
Elisa has agreed to be a spy for Long Whisper. She says she heard that there was a new First Blade, but didn't know who. She wants to help us bring down the rabbits. For Averin.
Wicker was silent. Perhaps Elisa did care for Averin. Perhaps he was too stubborn to see that. That is good. What of leading you to the compound?
I told her that we'd hold off on that until we had a more elite squad of soldiers. Despite our leadership, the elves are not ready for real combat. The rabbits will decimate any soldiers we brought and, no doubt, escape and set up somewhere different.
Wicker rubbed his chin. Are you planning on training an elite unit?
Truthfully, I was hoping Elisa would train a unit of troops in the ways of the Black Rabbit, use their own techniques against them. Have our troops think like a rabbit to flush out a rabbit.
What did she say? Marcus took another sip of his coffee.
She'd rather help as a spy, but did mention it was a good idea.
Wicker nodded. It is an interesting idea. An anti-rogue ops.
Just a thought. Until Elisa changes her mind, that's what it will stay.
Marcus stood up to pour himself another cup of coffee.
Wicca. Strife in the Varys and Esthenia grows in the south. There may be a war coming. Long Whisper may want to stay out of this with an army still so small.
What does that mean for you?
The majority of the White Cloaks take residence in Varys. Guildmaster Petrov wishes me to enlist as an officer in the Varys army if war does break out.
What of King Koda's army? Who will you send to in your stead? Danica? Maxwell? Wicker asked, his curiosity piquing.
You, actually.
Marcus smiled. Wicker raised an eyebrow. But you retired me, and I was only ever a sergeant.
Wicker, I trust you most to keep a level head and to be the eyes and ears of the Elven forces. They will need a leader who is well trained and who is honest and hardworking. I want you to enlist in King Koda's fledgling army. You have the experience that is desperately needed.
Wicker's heart skipped a beat. He wanted this, but he didn't know if he wanted it or still needed it for closure. Marcus chuckled, patting Wicker's hand.
You need some time to decide. It's bigger news than you could have hoped for. I'm home for the next week on leave. If you say yes, come back to Lost Dawns with me. If not, I'll understand.
Wicker nodded. He would need those days to think. Chapter 37. The horse trotted down the puddle-spotted path toward Ravenshore. At its rear, it pulled a cart used to haul newly gathered recruits for the Black Rabbits. Inlay balanced a knife on his fingertip before spinning it into the air and catching it. He did this repeatedly when he was bored. Ellicard had pointed this out on several occasions. Jetta took inventory of her herbs, medical supplies, and instruments. Ellicard, taking hold of the reins, smiled pleasantly in the cool spring day. It was his turn to head into a village to recruit potential rabbits. This was a task that a First Blade had to be familiar with. He was excited at the responsibility, but also at the prospect of returning to Ravenshore. It had been 6 years since he was a useless kid destined to be a fisherman. If it were not for the Black Rabbits, life as he knew it would have been drastically different and far more boring. A large wooden wall with a pair of armored guards posted outside came into sight. Ellicard, bewildered by this unfamiliar sight, halted the cart. Master, is this Ravenshore? Inlay asked, lifting his head just above the rim of the cart. Ellicard, why is there a wall around our village? Who are those men? They don't look like white cloaks. Jetta spoke with a mixture of curiosity and surprise in her tone. Ellicard scanned the perimeter. Several men in polished bronze armor adorned with the Dawnage insignia marched back and forth across a tall wooden wall. This was very discomforting to the new First Blade. Inlay, Jetta, throw on your traveler's cloaks, Ellicard ordered. Jetta was right. These men were not white cloaks. They were different. Are we still recruiting? Inlay asked as he pulled up his hood and removed his mask. No, we're on a new mission now. Ellicard's eyes remained fixed on the armored sentinels as he spoke. We're investigating the changes made to Ravenshore. Find out who these men are, when they got here, and how long they're staying. Jetta, you and I are going to ask for our families. Try to find out as much as you can. Meet up at the local tavern called the Rusty Hook. The two teammates nodded with understanding. The old docks creaked under Ellicard's feet as the salty air pelted his eyes and nostrils. Spotting the rickety old fishing vessel, Ellicard watched motionless as he saw his father trying to heave rope onto a post. The grizzled elf hadn't changed one bit. His crimson beard covered his sea-worn features. A heavy woolen coat hung on his body as he hopped past Ellicard. His father didn't bat an eye at the man standing before him, but he ordered him around nonetheless. You gonna stand around looking useless all day, or you gonna grab that batch of fish? Your mother's making a stew, and she's gonna need something to put in it. Ellicard snapped out of his nostalgic daze. Pa? Well, you better hurry up. I ain't gonna wait all day, his father said gruffly. Ellicard, still confused, shouldered a string of fish and followed the old man to his former home. Ellicard followed River into the small cottage. The familiar smell of his mother's cooking floated through the air, and a fog of memories clouded Ellicard's head. It's been a while, hasn't it, Ellicard? River asked in a low voice before calling to his wife. Celine, the third plate, we have a visitor. A sing-song voice chimed from the kitchen. Is Lyra Breezeluck paying us another visit? Celine walked around the corner, cleaning her hands with a dish towel. When her eyes locked onto him, she dropped the towel and stood frozen in the doorway. Ellicard was similarly affected. He slowly lowered his hood and attempted to find the words to say. In a moment such as this, they did not come easily. Ma, I'm home, he managed. Tears bubbled in Celine's eyes as she ran to her lost son and embraced him in a tight hug. Ellicard, you're here! You're really here! River put a rough and heavy hand on Ellicard's shoulder, hiding his emotional urge to never let go of his only son again. Welcome back home, Ellicard. Ellicard, careful not to get too attached to this moment, spoke it quickly. Ma, Pa, I'm not here because I'm on leave. I need information on Ravenshore. River tried not to rush the fleeting time Ellicard had. First we eat, then we'll discuss your black rabbit business. Dinner was quiet for some time. The only sounds in the air were of spoons clanking on wooden bowls and teeth chewing the potato and fish stew. Finally, River had to ask the question that burned in him since he heard the rumors. Were you responsible for the assassination of Jalen, son? Celine thrust him an ice-cold stare. River, we promised we wouldn't talk about that. She turned and smiled at Ellicard. We're just happy you came back home. Ellicard shot him a glance. How could he tell his parents that he was the one that killed their king? He was celebrated among his peers, but reviled in the rest of the world. River egged on further. That's true, though, isn't it? River searched his son's dark eyes for an answer, but what he found sunk his heart. More than that. You killed him, didn't you? What if I had? Ellicard blurted, dropping his silverware on the table. How could someone from Ravenshire, our son, become the most infamous criminal in all of Long Whisper? Ellicard stopped chewing. He glared at the man that used to be his father before Legion came into his life. It was in another lifetime in the distant past that he had lived in this household. Now, he was one of the most notorious assassins to ever bear the name Black Rabbit. He was the first blade now. He was the monster every child feared was hiding under their bed. He relished in it all. Criminals break the law. Rabbits don't live by the same law that civilians do. Our code allows us to carry on the work of Alana, to balance the scales when they tip over. We are the wildfire that purges the overgrown forest. Father, my assassination was necessary. River was irked by the statement. So, you are an outlaw. Do you really believe everything you just said? Not even Alana herself would stand for such blatant madness. Ellicard turned a face away from his father. I would never expect a fisherman to understand my duties. It takes an evolved individual to become a black rabbit, not like those other three that came from Raven. Ellicard let his voice trail off before finishing. River stood up. What of them? Blacksmith's apprentice, stable boy, what happened to them? A darkness shrouded Ellicard's mind as he thought of his past actions. They didn't evolve, he said coldly. River moved around the table and lifted Ellicard up by the cowl to face him. No remorse. What happened to you, Ellicard? Do you see what you become? I've become a rabbit. Though he wasn't completely sure what he'd become. He spoke the words he was trained to say, but they became hollow. They were just words that no longer carried the weight they once had. He had everything that every black rabbit dreamed about, that he dreamed about. But now that he had it all in his grasp, he was unsure if he were happy with it at all. Celine rocked the table by slamming her hand on top of it. Enough, both of you. We are together. Maybe not for long, maybe not for the right reasons, but isn't being together enough? She began to weep into her hands. I've wanted this more than anything, and now I have it. I don't want it anymore. River went to comfort his wife. I'm sorry, Celine, I really am. He turned to Ellicard. Aren't you happy you're home? Tell your mother how much you missed her. Ellicard sat motionless, a cold realization dawning on him there. He hadn't missed either of them. He had to get out now. It was not fair or right to stay and lead them to a false hope that he knew was as hollow as what he had become. I have to go, he said, coldly. River snapped a growl at him. Leave then. Go back to your black rabbits. I hope you find happiness in your pitiful life, because there's nothing left for you here. You're right, Ellicard said before walking out the door. The Rusty Hook was formerly a bar for the fishermen and traveling merchants that docked their ships in Ravenshore's port. However, with the influx of soldiers, it had become the hangout of guards looking to get a drink and a bite to eat after a long day of keeping the fishing village safe. Inlay, Jetta, and Ellicard sat at a corner table, their hoods shadowing their faces as they spoke in secretive whispers too low for anyone but them to hear. The wall was raised a month ago, when the guards were assigned to Ravenshore and its neighboring villages. Inlay recounted his information. The new king, Coda of the Dawn Edge, has raised an army. They're being trained by the former Long Whisper division of Whitecloaks, Jetta added. They're attempting to block us from recruiting. We must tell Legion at once, Ellicard said, sneering at the sight of the guards walking around the bar. Ungrateful fools, Inlay spat. It's an honor to be recruited by the rabbits. We do good work for this nation. This is what the people want. For years, the Black Rabbits have kidnapped their children of these villages and turned them loose against their own country. How can you blame them for standing up for themselves? Jetta retorted, leering at Inlay. Inlay scowled at her. You've never believed in our cause. You would betray us the first chance you got. Now is your chance, Jetta. Turn us in. Save your own cowardly skin. Forsake the Black Rabbits. Forsake Alana. Enough, Inlay. The argument with his father had almost completely eroded his patience. A fresh outburst from the everlasting feud between the two teammates was the last thing he needed. Inlay drove a knife into the table, turning some of the guards' heads. Ellicard, why do you protect her? She brings nothing but venom to our clan. I've seen her medallion, a mark of Alu, not Alana. She wears a mask to hide her two faces. She needs to be dealt with, as any traitor to the clan would be. Jetta stood fast, clenching her teeth in anger. She hated the clan, but was fiercely loyal to Ellicard. Nonetheless, she could hold back her fury no longer. Betray the clan? The clan is a blight on this land. You speak of purging and reaping the weeds that keep the world from flourishing. The Black Rabbits are the real weeds in the garden. Inlay crashed the table away from him, shaking with unquenchable rage. He grabbed Jetta's collar and slammed her against the wall, a knife gripped tightly in his fist, pressed against Jetta's neck. You bitch! I will gut you right here in front of everyone, and we'll see that you bleed black like the color of your heart. All you do is twist Ellicard's mind. No more! I won't let you do any more harm to him or my clan. Jetta spat a slimy wad of mucus into Inlay's face. Water for your garden. Inlay's silver eyes widened with animosity, unleashing a backhanded blow to Jetta's cheek. Without hesitation, Ellicard pulled his student off her and caught him in the gut with a heavy punch. Inlay fell to his knees, groaning in pain. Ellicard's blade sheened under his student's neck. I said enough, Inlay. Inlay sneered at Jetta, trying to call himself in the shadow of his master. Master, he lowered his voice, fury still under his breath. You can't protect her. She speaks blasphemy. Ellicard tensely looked around the growing crowd of soldiers and sailors edging closer to their incident. He sheathed his sword and dragged Inlay to his feet, whispering in his ear, Our enemies are too close to be dealing with you a feud against Jetta. But master, Inlay whispered back,
Drop it, Inlay. This is not your call,
Ellicard hissed. Jeddah gathered her composure and addressed the gathering crowd. My friend has just had one too many beers. Excuse us, we were just leaving. Ellicard slapped a few gold trit onto the counter. Sorry to sour the mood. Drinks are on me. A wave of gleeful cheers erupted from the patrons of the tavern. Ellicard put a sincere arm around Jeddah, comforting her. Inlay shot them both an irritated glare.
Ellicard, I will save you from the witch's clutches.
Chapter 38.
He is a crooked nail. Nothing but a defective tool in this state. Completely ineffective to us.
The silent master's low growl of a voice passed through the dark quarters. Legion knelt before him. Inlay stood off to the side, enamored by the presence of the legendary Highblade and the silent master.
Blinded by the words of the girl, my silent master. She is a fragment of his past with great influence over him. Moreover, she has defied our teachings, giving her even more control over his mind. Ellicard is just the symptom. Jeddah is the virus.
Legion spoke frankly. The silent master turned to Inlay.
You have seen this venom affect our first blade. How can I be sure you are not merely jealous of his affection for her?
Inlay chuckled at the concept of being jealous of Jeddah, but bowed his head reverently. Jeddah was, at first, a harmless comfort to Ellicard, but over time I have watched as she rotted away his mind with one blasphemy after another. A look of disgust spread across his face. The longer you allow people like Jeddah to fester within our clan, the further away our Ellicard will become.
Legion, here's your apprentice, so it falls to you to deal with this problem. Kill the girl.
The words left Silent Master without emotion or pity. Legion's eyes widened, knowing full well what this act would do to his relationship with Ellicard.
Master, Jeddah's loss to Ellicard may do more harm than good. Allow me to banish Jeddah. Within time, Ellicard will forget about her as he once did. But if I kill her, Ellicard will lash out. He will lash at me. Now,
interjected Raijin. He was disgusted by Legion's weakness.
I allow you to spare a life once before. The life of scum who worked directly against me, against our clan. No, I will not allow you to show mercy once more. You will kill this girl and make an example out of her. We will not have another Avalon. I will do this task, my master, but Ellicard must not know it was me. If he does, it will tarnish.
Legion knew that killing Jeddah would shatter any trust or love Ellicard ever had for him. He was like a son to him. Destroying that relationship would be the end of Legion. He would need to keep this secret, even if it killed him to do so. The silent master was right. He showed great weakness when he spared Malady. He would need to keep his reputation intact, or he feared he would be the next target in Raijin's sights.
My influence over him.
The silent master rubbed his chin.
The boy will overcome whatever pitiful affection he has for the girl, but your secrets are yours to keep. He will not find out from me who killed her. Legion, send Ellicard and Inlay on a mission. Have it be an evaluation of Inlay's accumulated skills. When they return, the deed shall be done.
Inlay and Legion bowed. Ellicard and Inlay perched in the shadows looking down at Galdo's butcher shack. Galdo was a mercenary that had a knack for poaching jobs from the Black Rabbits, an action the clan had taken notice of. Listen up, Inlay. Legion has seen fit to have you complete this mission as a final test to ascend from being my student to my colleague. Yes, master, Inlay said, nodding intently. A wild ball of several emotions hung in the back of his mind. This was the night Jeddah was to be taken out of the picture. His master would be set free from such a twisting weight. Inlay was free as well. To be with him. This Galdo is not to be taken lightly. What he lacks in speed and agility, he makes up tenfold in power and resilience, Ellicard continued. Yes, master, Inlay replied, as he fingered through his satchel full of tools and weaponry. Stay light on your feet and keep moving. We'll tire him and take him down before he has a chance to fight back, Ellicard said, taking a mental note of a large gathering of clouds moving in from the east. Master, Inlay pointed at the door of the shack. Movement, This could be our opening.
Aye. Well spotted, Inlay. Ellicard whispered, quickly turning his attention back to the cabin. Moments later, a towering man with thick, muscular arms covered in matching dragon and demon tattoos exited the shack. Hoisted over his shoulder was a massive chunk of steel, shaped into a jagged sword. Ellicard signaled Inlay to drop from their hiding spots and followed his lead. Their feet strode along the grass as if gliding in the shadows. Ellicard silently drew his blade and drove it straight into Galdo's back. Inlay appeared in front of the giant man and struck into his lower chest. Galdo cried out in pain before swinging his thick sword in a wide arc at the two assassins. Blade in hand, they nimbly dodged the attack, regrouping some feet away. Low to the ground, Ellicard gestured to Inlay. The shadow elf complied and dashed forward, slashing at Galdo's legs, spraying blood from long cuts. Galdo roared ferociously and caught Inlay by the throat with a titan's grip. Inlay gasped for breath and clawed desperately at the giant's arms. Galdo mercilessly slammed Inlay into the ground. Ellicard made his move, jumping and slashing down Galdo's right shoulder. Galdo barely flinched as he backhanded Ellicard away, sending the elf flying into a large tree. Galdo raised his sword over his head and brought it crashing down toward Inlay's crumpled body. At the last moment, the rabbit's shoulder rolled away. Recovering, Inlay slid behind the man and cut through his tendons, bringing the incredibly large man down to his knees with a thundering crash. Ellicard shook off the daze and lunged at the fallen mercenary with a series of muscle-slicing swipes aimed at the behemoth's chest and arms. Galdo grunted as he tried to stand, but fell back down as Inlay skewered him in the back. Galdo fell to his hands, scowling at the two rabbits. Ellicard sheathed his blade, bowing to Inlay. "Do the honors." Inlay nodded, dropping his blade in a savage arc, cleaving Galdo's neck almost entirely free of his body. The giant's head hung by what few threads of muscle fiber, tendons, and veins tethered it to his mutilated body. Chapter 39. "Are you sure you don't want me to come? You two might get hurt," Jeddah said. Her medic satchel was packed up and slung around her shoulder. She stood in the First Blade's quarters, already preparing for another mission. Ellicard placed his hands on her enthusiastic shoulders. Inlay stood in the archway, leaning against the frame. Ellicard removed her satchel and placed it on the ground. "Not this time, Jeddah. Master Legion told me this is to be a special test for Inlay. He'll need to be able to take on this mark with little assistance from even me." Ellicard smirked as he watched Jeddah's disappointing eyes lower. "Cheer up, Jeddah. We three will still have plenty of missions together." Jeddah watched as the two boys walked out of the quarters. She waved them goodbye.
"May Alu watch over you, Ellicard,"
she whispered. Jeddah carefully dug into the ground with a small spade to extract the delicate fever root from the cool soil. Clipping the thin tendrils off the root with her shears, she put what she gathered into her bag. She brushed off the dirt the best she could from her trousers. She then pulled out her water skin and poured a small amount of water onto the dirty hands to wash them. She looked around the quiet forest and shivered in the brisk evening air. A cluttered sound in the trees directed her attention. She peered into the tall pines to see a large crow cawing at her. The oily black feathers sheened in the rapidly falling sunset. Two more crows sailed into the trees to join the first. Each cackled at her before moving closer to another tree near Jeddah. "Oh, bugger off, I'm leaving," Jeddah muttered. Jeddah took account of what she was able to gather up, slightly disappointed that she was unable to find any emberwort to make new blister cloth, but the several bushels of fever root was a lucky harvest. Jeddah walked through the woods as the shadows grew longer and the air grew crisper. She picked up her pace to make her curfew, knowing full well a rabbit unaccounted for would be a punished rabbit. However, she slowed down to a slow walk as she approached the small bridge that went over the creek. This bridge was where she first reunited with Ellicard. It was where she vowed to be a stronger person for him, for her friend. She rested on the banister and lazily watched a leaf move chaotically around the rocks and into slower waters. It's how she felt these days, that she struggled with the black rabbits, trying to fight back against the current, but any time she was with Ellicard, he knew he and she would someday find their slower waters. That one day they would find peace. "You're out late."
Jeddah quickly looked to her side, startled by the sudden appearance of Legion. She always liked Legion. They didn't know each other well, but Ellicard always spoke with admiration about his master. "Forgive me, my High Blade, I was—" Jetta clumsily hobbled over her own words, knowing it was nearly past curfew.
"No need to forgive yourself. I know you were out gathering medical supplies."
Legion walked closer, smiling faintly. He leaned over the same banister and mused over the gentle stream.
"I come here when I want to think about what weighs most on me."
Jetta turned back to watch the stream. Weighs most on me? I often think about that as well. Legion glanced at the young elf.
"What weighs on you now, young one?"
Jetta furrowed her brows as tears slowly swelled in her eyes. She rubbed her eyes with her sleeve. "Highblade, I was never meant for such a life. Even its goddess rejects me. I feel like I am a leaf caught in a storm, endlessly floating, lost and alone. I seek my tree." Legion nodded. Her tree. Her tree was Ellicard. He let out a heavy sigh and put an arm around the grieving elf.
"Jetta, Ellicard is but a leaf in the storm too. Do you know why he flourishes, though?"
Jetta looked at the scarred man. "Why?"
"Ellicard does not seek an end to the storm, because he knows as a leaf he does not matter. Someday he will fall to the ground and wither into the soil like any other leaf."
Jetta looked away, a metaphor she couldn't have articulated better herself. Ellicard was at the mercy of the Black Rabbit storm.
"Jetta, the storm will always blow, no matter if you are trapped in it or not. What you must realize is that just because we are in it doesn't mean we are trapped."
Legion grasped Jetta in a long hug.
"I am sorry if you always felt trapped. I am sorry you were always so aimless that you couldn't find your peace or happiness."
He slowly unsheathed the dagger. Jetta clenched her eyes shut, tears dropping over and down her cheeks. Please let Ellicard go. He deserves to be freed from your storm. I'll stay in his place." Her words were a raspy whisper now. She tightened her grip on Legion's cloak as she pleaded. Legion pushed Jetta off of him, the dagger brandished in his hand.
"Jetta,"
he spoke, shaking. Of all the lives he was ordered to take, this was the one he regretted before taking. Even when he killed his own father, he had no remorse. However, staring into the eyes of this young woman, he knew this death would set a chain reaction of events that would bury him in sorrow for the rest of his life.
"Jetta, someday I'll save Ellicard for you. Someday he'll be set free, but he will have to be in this storm without his tree, without you to be his beacon, without you to show him his way back home."
Jetta stumbled backwards, but then stood still. She knew the rabbits would one day try to separate her from Ellicard. She lifted her chin, not in submission, but in defiance. "I'll pray for you, Legion." Legion swiped cleanly across her throat and threw the knife into the wooden planks in anguish. Jetta gurgled, trying to breathe as blood gushed from her wound. She fell to her knees, but kept her chin up, tears streaming from her eyes. She shakily held her hands in contrition. "Alu, can you hear me?" Jetta collapsed at Legion's feet. His head bowed in depression. He crushed Ellicard's last breath of hope, his last tether to his past, his last piece of himself. Crushed beneath the feet of the Black Rabbit. He would either rise to be the soulless assassin the Silent Master would want him to be, or he would become the withered leaf on the ground. Either way, he would be lost without guidance. "Alu, I want to go home." Chapter 40. The clouds rolled in, setting a grim shadow upon the Black Rabbit compound. Ellicard stood quivering. The entire clan knelt around the center. Raijin stood cold and still, his hands folded across his chest. Jetta's lifeless body strewn on the stone ground. Her clothes were soaked through from a gaping opening in her throat. Her eyes, stricken open from witnessing her own traumatic demise, stared blankly at Ellicard. His nails dug into his palms as his fists tightly closed, turning his skin a ghostly white. His body trembled as he struggled to stand.
Jetta.
A silence blanketed the retreat. Ellicard's face wrinkled in complete anguish as he began to bawl uncontrollably. He fell to her body, cradling her in his arms. Her blood seeped into his clothes as he held her tightly in his embrace. He felt as if he held her tighter, he might rouse her from her bloody slumber. I wasn't there. I wasn't there to protect you. I'm sorry. Please don't do this. I'm so sorry. Inlay slowly moved forward, crouching down beside his grieving friend. Alucard, it was for the best. Now you can move on without conflict or confusion. Alucard clenched his eyes shut. He sucked in lungs of air and stopped his crying before exhaling a single question. Inlay, what do you mean? Alucard turned and stared at his masked pupil with eyes hot from tears. Inlay placed a hand on Alucard's shoulder. Alucard, you knew this day was coming. You knew she needed to be dealt with. She was corrupting your mind. You couldn't think clearly with her around. A blade is only as sharp as the rabbit who wields it. Confusion scried over the elf's face. Alucard spoke quietly. Inlay, did you know about this? Inlay shook his head. It doesn't matter who was involved, Alucard. You need to let her go. With the king's soldier... Who did this? Alucard asked with a biting chill. It doesn't matter, Alucard, Inlay said again. Who did this? Who killed Jetta? Alucard shouted at the top of his lungs. Alucard snapped his head, searching for any rabbit brave enough to come forth with the truth. Finally, his eyes rested on Raijin. Alucard softly laid down Jetta's body and made his way toward the Silent Master. Tell me, who did this? Raijin slightly raised his chin. Take her body and bury her. Put her to rest and beg Alana to take pity on her traitorous soul. Mourn for however long you must, then put it behind you. This is what I expect, no, command of my first blade. Alucard's eyes shifted from a tormented sadness to a deathly coolness as thoughts raced through his head. Raijin, who killed Jetta? The Silent Master replied slowly with a dangerous edge to his voice. Bury her, and bury your hatred with her. I will not tell you again. Alucard gently picked up the lifeless body of his childhood friend and walked toward the woods, calling back to the assassins watching. Pray to Alana I never find the rabbit who did this. Chapter 41. You saw stars in even the cloudiest of nights, Jetta. I don't know how you did it, but you never gave in. You never surrendered, and they tried to extinguish the flame that burned inside you. And here we are. Alucard chuckled as he stood over the makeshift grave marker. Her blood stained his garbs and gloves. He had no more tears to shed for his fallen friend. I made a promise to protect you, and in the end, it was you who protected me. You know, my father and you might have been right all along, but I don't know if any of that matters now. Alucard quickly drew his sword. He wasn't alone anymore. Have you come to pay your respects? Inlay had a hand resting on his blade's handle and stepped cautiously from the shadows. He knelt in front of the grave and said a silent prayer to Alana. You should have played your cards better, Jetta. In another lifetime, perhaps. Alucard turned to Inlay. I never told you about what I did to become a rabbit, Inlay. I've heard rumors, Inlay said quietly, not sure of the purpose of the conversation. 3 of my friends from Ravensshore. We survived the Blood Forest together. They ran away from the rabbits, hoping to start a new life away from it all. I had the chance to join them, but I killed them instead. Inlay nodded. You did the right thing, Master. I don't know that I did. I don't know that anything I do is the right thing anymore, Alucard said. Exhaustion and confusion set in as he buried his face in his palms. Master, that's Jetta talking. Do not listen to her. Remember your lessons. Remember who your family is. My family. My family is in Ravenshore wondering how their son became so lost. My family is in the ground before our feet. My family would never have me kill my king or my friends. My family is who I promised to protect. Ellicard spat as he turned his head to face the Shadow Elf. My family is not the Black Rabbits. Inlay stepped backwards, his hand still on his sword handle. Ellicard, please. I don't want to harm you. No blood has to be shed tonight. You forget so soon. Blood has already been shed. Ellicard sneered, sliding his blade from its sheath. Stand aside, Inlay. This clan has manipulated me long enough. It's time I dealt retribution. Inlay drew his blade. The Silent Master was right. You are a defective tool. That bitch has twisted you too much. Her death was supposed to put her mind games to rest. I wish I cut her throat myself. Ellicard roared, tears flowing from his eyes as he rushed his former student. The rabbits have poisoned every aspect of my life. They stripped away the potential you have and replaced it with a drive to murder. And for what? Ellicard yelled as he savagely swung his blade. Inlay parried and unleashed a ruthless backhand, swiveling Ellicard's head. The drive to murder. Have you forgotten our divine purpose in life? There is no greater honor than to live and die by the Black Rabbit's blade. Ellicard snapped his head back fast enough to dodge a series of thrusts from Inlay's sword. How can you think Alana would want us to slay the innocent for coin? Inlay, they feed us lies. I saw the prince's eyes when I took his father from him. I was a fool to think that a man uniting his people deserved to die. It brought me no closer to the glory than the rabbits promised. How is a society supposed to function if there are individuals that live outside the law? Inlay jumped, spinning into a roundhouse kick that sent Ellicard sliding backwards. You speak with the same bile as Jetta. It pains me to see you as an enemy. I loved you. Ellicard took out a fan of shurikens. Rabbits are incapable of love, Inlay. Even before the shurikens plunged into his chest, it was as if Ellicard clenched and crushed Inlay's heart. Wide-eyed and speechless, Inlay stood entranced as he took a flying kick to the head and crashed to the ground. He slowly recovered to his feet, his head lowered, his mask veiled in the shadows. Ellicard readied his blade before charging once more into the fray. Inlay broke from his daze and fired several mad swipes with his blade, slicing gruesomely into Ellicard's side and right shoulder. Ellicard ignored the sharp pain and unleashed a flurry of slashes. Several connected, spraying blood from the grievous wounds. Ellicard finished with a heavy kick to Inlay's chest, reeling him backwards. Inlay slid, catching himself with an arm and knee as he fell to the ground. Lifting his sword, Inlay leapt at his former master, cutting deeper into Ellicard's side. Inlay spun neatly, attempting to lop off Ellicard's head, but the elf was quick to raise his sword behind and block. Both blades were locked in a struggle. Inlay's energy and rage slowly rose. I did it all for you. For you, Ellicard! Ellicard slowly lifted Inlay's blade away from his exposed neck. With a flick of his wrist, he was able to send it out of Inlay's grip, sending it deep into a tree. Don't let your sick delusions fool you, Inlay. You did it all for yourself. Inlay slid a pair of small daggers into his hands and threw them at his enemy. Ellicard backflipped several feet, dodging them with grace. Ellicard landed, breathing hard. The gaping wound on his side poured blood onto the grassy forest floor. Inlay frantically ran to his sword, which was still stuck in the tree. Ellicard snapped a shuriken through the air, catching Inlay's palm as he reached for the weapon. Inlay growled in pain, giving Ellicard enough time to drop-kick Inlay onto his back. While kneeling on top of him, Ellicard heaved his sword face down over Inlay's chest and stabbed downwards. Ellicard stopped just short of the Shadow Elf's chest. Pull off your mask, Inlay. Inlay slowly complied, removing his mask, eyes wide in fear. You won't die tonight, not you. Ellicard hissed. Thunder bellowed across the heavy night skies. No one will ever love you the way I did, Inlay whispered. His eyes now flared with passion. The rain came down fast and hard. Blood seeped into the pores of the wet ground. Ellicard stood, towering over his apprentice, his sword still pointed at Inlay's cut-up chest. I want you to understand this, Inlay. I want you to watch this clan burn. I want you to have it all come down around you. And when you have suffered as much as me, then I will kill you. Inlay started. A hefty kick across Inlay's face rendered him out cold. Chapter 42. The winds howled as Ellicard entered the compound. The rain was relentless. It pounded on his shoulders and the wind bid him to turn around. But his hatred possessed him, and so onward he marched. Staggering into the familiar center of the clan, Ellicard hunched over, leaning slightly on his and Inlay's swords, as if they were canes. Ellicard lifted his head and jeered at Raijin, who seemed unmoved by his dramatic reappearance. The black rabbits have tipped the scales. Ellicard could hardly speak, faint with the loss of blood. Raijin snapped his fingers, signaling for all the assassins to draw their weapons and move closer to Ellicard.
You are nothing but a rabid dog. You must be put down.
Blood dripped down both sides of his mouth as Ellicard responded. Will you put me down, Raijin? Or will one of your other dogs do it for you? Raijin smirked.
Kill him.
The rabbits roared as nearly 100 bodies leapt into the night to strike Ellicard down. Ellicard spun wildly, parrying and deflecting steel with his two swords. Taking well-placed strikes, Ellicard moved his way through the crowd, decimating and maiming his former clanmates. Bodies dropped to a bloody heap behind him. However, Ellicard moved slower and slower as swords, scythes, and daggers shredded and punctured his body. The closer he moved to Raijin, the weaker and more sluggish he became. Ellicard fell to his knees at the feet of the Silent Master, blood and rain soaking through his clothes. He could no longer lift his arms, nor his head. Who killed Jeddah? He murmured, barely aware of his surroundings. Raijin grabbed the weary Ellicard by the throat, lifting him up so they were eye to eye.
You'll die, never knowing,
the Silent Master whispered in his ear. Adrenaline pumped through Ellicard's body. He let out a soul-shattering scream as he lifted both swords and cross-cut the hands that choked him. Raijin reeled his head back in pain as his handless wrist gushed and sprayed blood across Ellicard's face. Raijin sneered, gritting his teeth as he landed a savage blow to Ellicard's chest with his remaining fist. Ellicard's chest compressed as his heart rattled. Landing hard, several feet away, Ellicard lay, sprawled on his back, drifting dangerously close to death. The rain pattered down on Ellicard's sleepy face. Jeddah, wait for me. Wait for me at the old willow tree. Ellicard heaved in a great whiff of breath as he rolled over. Sputtering up the iron taste of blood, he used his last bit of newfound energy to stand. Rabbits to either side of him cautiously shuffled forward, their clansmen blanketed the ground. Raijin seethed pure anger, shivering in pain while grasping his bloody stump. It was as if all time paused in a brief moment of solace. Ellicard reached into a pouch and exploded a smoke pellet on the ground, concealing a last-ditch effort to escape the dire situation.
After him!
Raijin shouted over and over as the pursuing assassins pierced through the smoky cover. Ellicard ran as fast as his battered body could take him, but collapsed at the cliff face of a waterfall. The waters rushed, more powerful from the stormy weather. Ellicard gripped his swords with a slippery, blood-soaked grip, waiting for any assassin to catch him. Legion moved into the moonlight from the shadows. Ellicard surrendered his blades to the feet of his friend and mentor. Legion kicked the swords aside in a clatter. He lifted up his student's bloody heap of a body. Ellicard, do you remember when you asked me if I kept any humanity? Yes, Master, Ellicard sputtered. You are my humanity, Ellicard. Legion kissed the forehead of the dying elf before dropping him over the waterfall. Several assassins approached Legion. Where is he? Legion passed them, heading back to the compound. It is done. Chapter 43. Let's see what you've learned, Megan said. She stood on the opposite end of the underground arena, surrounded by enchanted trees. Coda nodded and bowed his head before jumping into the air and landing with a heavy impact that shook the ground. The crackling and tightening sound of roots exploded from beneath Megan, attempting to bind and encase her. However, she was quick and rolled out of harm's way, only to find Coda manifesting several leaves with serrated edges to soar in her direction. Megan roared as her skin transformed into hard bark. The leaves bounced off her armored skin, and Megan answered back by transforming her hand into an outstretching vine laden with thorns, whipping and slapping at the ground, trying to catch the elf as he nimbly dodged out of the way of each attack. Coda tumbled toward Megan's right flank and mustered his courage to grab the next attack. He winced as the thorny vine wrapped around his arm and used the entanglement to yank Megan into close range. With trained reflexes and cunning, Coda conjured a small pile of dust into his hand and blew it into Megan's face. She sneezed before falling sleepily to the ground. Drowsily, she tied the thorny whip around her hand. The sharp pain kept her from falling asleep. A massive trunk rose beneath her feet, bringing her into the air. "Your clever tricks won't win the battle against me, Your Grace. Show me what you have really learned." Coda smirked, knowing well what she meant. Thrusting his hand into the air, he began to muster his focus into his palm. Light flashed around him as a brilliant blue aura enveloped him. His hand quivered as it lit up with bright light. Megan smiled, but her face quickly turned to dread as she was slowly lifted from her tree. Her arms fell to her sides as if she was bound by an unknown force. She struggled against the alien power, but to no avail. Coda's thoughts raced wildly, and his vision became blurry. Sweat dripped from his forehead, and his face went pale. The strain overcame him as he swung his arm downward, crashing his teacher to the ground. Megan dazedly stumbled as she tried to stand. A laceration bled from the side of her head. The power to control life itself. That is just the surface of the Magi's power. We must learn more. Coda collapsed to the ground, heaving. We will. We must to protect my people. Megan grinned. You have done well, Coda. Coda stood before the Council of Teachers once again. Now older, now wiser, and now a mage in his own right. Megan bowed as she presented him with the official robes of a graduated vernal mage. You have earned the right to wear these robes more than most, Coda. You have untapped potential that needs molding. In the future, you will find that you will be challenged both mentally, physically, and spiritually. May you remember what the school has taught you, and may success follow wherever you go. Coda bowed and accepted the robes from his master. He proudly donned the ornate threads and tied the green sash around his waist tightly. Pride swelled in his heart. I will apply what you have taught me. You will see. I have seen already, Megan said, smiling. Coda sat, holding his goblet aloft. Wine sloshed around the rim as he rose to his feet. Large quantities of smoked meats and roasted vegetables laid across the long banquet table. On either side of him, lords and their advisors sat enjoying the feast put on by the royal family. The noise that echoed in the large dining room quieted as the elves turned to see what their young king had to say. Friends, I gather you all to feast in a period of new-found peace. Our army grows in power each day. It has been a mere 3 months since we began training up our forces, and yet we received numerous reports from several towns across the country. The Black Rabbits have not dared to make any appearances. It is safe to say that their numbers are dwindling. Our city flourishes, and our people are no longer living in fear. I raise to you all a toast to Long Whisper. May we continue in our prosperity. All but one noble raised their drink. Athar stood, unimpressed.
What of the inevitable war in the south? King Dallin of Varys and King Arik of Estina have failed to reach a treaty. Arik will no doubt invade Varys and attempt to conquer and enslave the people there.
Eyes turned and locked onto a nervous Coda. I was unaware of such a conflict. Athar laughed with a mocking tone.
Here we have a green king, completely oblivious of his own borders. My lords, this is our leader.
Coda began to sweat, unable to handle this level of criticism. And what news have you heard from Varys?
Elven refugees afraid of an oncoming war are flocking to our lands. Varys supported your father's rise to the crown. No doubt we should support Varys in their time of need.
Cass Baneberry suggested.
Our army may be growing,
but they have never seen a real battle. Our forces would be crushed in actual combat, Fendrick Redroot said flatly. We can't just ignore Varys, Aisling said, raising her voice over the shouts from the various noblemen. Toll leaned into Coda's ear. My king, you must take control of the situation and make a decision. But Toll, what if I make the wrong choice? Coda asked, afraid of such a decision and what devastation it could do to the nation's fledgling peace. Toll patted him on the shoulder reassuringly. Coda, any decision is better than no decision. Show them that you can lead a nation, not just in time of peace, but in a time of need as well. Coda raised his hands, simmering down the arguing. My lords, we must raise the shield of courage for our people and for those seeking our protection. Estina wishes to burn Varys, so who is to say they will stop there? We must stand beside our allies and quell this threat, Coda said. The confidence he gained from becoming a mage resonated in his voice.
Well said, young king. You will be remembered as the hero that led Long Whisper to victory.
Athar Moonfall cheered, smiling and clapping. The nobles rose from their seats clapping in awe, inspired by the bravado of Coda. Cast in the weak lightning of the rose garden, Athar Moonfall whispered angrily with his most trusted advisor.
Silva, you pea-brained rat. That is the second time you were wrong about Coda.
My lord, my eyes are everywhere in this city. I swear the information I had was to be trusted.
The same eyes that assured you he would not take the crown?
Athar spat mockingly. Silva nodded anxiously.
I'm trying to orchestrate the fall of the Darnedge house, and yet with each blow I make to them, they recover with double force. This war, however, could prove an opportunity for Coda to, for lack of a better word, perish in combat, and I, myself, to rise a hero.
Athar Moonfall grinned delightfully at the thought.
My people tell me that the rabbits have trouble in their burrow. Perhaps we should wait for them to get reorganized before making our next move,
Silva whispered, looking around as if the black rabbits were watching her every move.
Tell me, who are these eyes? I must know this.
Silva shook her head.
If identities were revealed, my eyes may go blind.
Very well. Keep your secrets, Silva. But fail me again, and your eyes will be the least of your worries,
Athar warned. Chapter 44. Marcus sat on the riverbank, a fishing rod resting in his hands. A long blade of grass was fixed between his teeth. He turned to watch as his son sat beside him with heavy bags beneath his eyes. Marcus moved to shield him from the glare of the morning sun.
Not used to waking up at dawn anymore,
Marcus chuckled, passing him a mug of coffee. What makes you think that the fish aren't still sleeping? Wicker said, taking a sip from the mug and frowning from the lack of cream and sugar.
Believe it or not, it was your mother that got me into fishing. Your great-grandfather taught her the secret of fishing at daybreak. She fished every morning. Even when she got sick, she still fished.
Marcus grew silent, remembering Vivian. Wicker let a moment pass between them, taking in the silence, before speaking again. I was too young at the time, but how did you deal with losing her?
I never did. Averin took care of me. He became the man of the house while I wallowed in depression and self-pity. I had to shut out all the love I had for your mother to move on. I don't take death very well.
Marcus let out a sigh.
I know you see me as this great commander and strong figure, but when your mother died, when the Bane blood sickness wilted her body into a shell, I just couldn't handle it.
Father, Marcus choked, closing his eyes tightly.
When Averin fell, I shut you out. I reverted to the same weak-minded man I once was. Wicker, in many ways, you're a stronger man than I am.
Wicker paused, but tried to lighten the tension that hung in the air. I've decided to take your offer. I want to join Long Whisper's ranks. Averin wanted me not to be blinded by hatred. He wanted me to be a stronger leader. Wicker nodded to his own words. I want to be that leader. Marcus grinned as a low laugh escaped him.
Well, for your first duty, why don't you brew me another cup of coffee?
Wicker laughed, taking the mug and walking across the field back to the cabin. Marcus turned back to his fishing line. From the corner of his eye, he saw a large object floating downstream. At first, he could not make out what it was. A villager's laundry gone rogue? Perhaps a river trader's boat had lost some small cargo. As it drew closer, his eyes widened. It was a body, lifeless and bobbing with the ebb and flow of the river. Marcus tossed his fishing rod aside and leapt into the water. He pulled the battered body to the shore.
Wicca! Hurry, come back!
Wicca ran to his father's side as Marcus felt for any signs of life.
Wicca, fetch the medical supplies. This elf is still alive. Wicca!
Wicker stood utterly frozen as he looked down upon the broken body of the elf that had caused him so much misery and strife.
Wicca!
Marcus yelled, hoping to snap Wicker out of the trance he was in. Son!
Let him die,
Wicker said, with no hint of emotion or pity.